Joined now in the studio by the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress, Omoyele Sowore. Great to see you, Mr. Sowore.
Thank you, and great to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Is that tongue-in-cheek, this challenge you've thrown out to Atiku, Tinubu, and Obi, who are, Atiku and Tinubu in their 70s, Obi in his 60s, calling for them to join you in the Lagos Marathon next week? What's the idea behind that?
The idea behind it is that marathons are well-known races that bring old and young people together. It's one of the races I know that doesn't have age limitations. In fact, the first marathon I ran in Philadelphia, I was standing beside a 73-year-old guy, and I thought I would beat him blue. But after 3 miles, I couldn't see the back of his head anymore. So anybody could run a marathon. But most importantly, after the death of Yaradua and his health, I think health has become a major conversation around elections. And if you remember in 2019, Atiku released a photo of himself on a treadmill. Buhari tried to do something that makes him look a bit fit. So we are returning back to the discussion about health, and that people who want to govern a sick country should at least be able to do healthy things. And one of it is taking a run. But here is the caveat.
Well, it doesn't have to be a marathon.
It doesn't have to, that's the caveat. I'm actually doing only 10K.
Right.
But I've done 8 marathons in my lifetime. They don't have to do 10K. Maybe just like 500 meters. Let's try something like that.
So you're hoping they'll pick up the gauntlet, join you in the track, and then keel over and die?
If they say they are healthy, they won't die, and they don't have to die. But I'm serious about it. I think we should not be electing people who are older than our country. Nigeria is 62. It's never had a candidate run the country that is less than 60 years old. And the fact that we've had a lot of health issues with our president is also a reason why we must care about the health of these candidates. In the US, it is very important that they know the health of their candidates. If the US president goes in to check on his health, before he gets out, the doctors are releasing the results of the health, because it's important to govern a country. You can't tell me that somebody who is not physically healthy or mentally healthy should run a country that has 200 million people in it that are running around like crazy.
No, I do agree with you that health is important.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got to have the capacity to do the job. But running a marathon isn't really the way to prove that they can run a country successfully, is it?
It's part of the way I didn't say they should run a marathon. I just said join the young people you love so much, even if it has to be at the starting line, and do a bit of show of effort that you can withstand some rigorous exercise.
But some would suggest...
the president of the US rides a bike.
Yeah.
He fell on a bike recently. So there's no excuse, and he's not young. I think Biden is going towards 80.
Yeah, he is.
President Clinton used to exercise a lot.
Well, Clinton was a lot younger.
Obama played basketball.
Yeah, Obama was a lot younger, let's face it.
Bush used to run 6 miles every morning before he gets into office. We have had to spend a lot on sick presidents, including one here who spent almost 100 and something days in the London hospital. Nigeria cannot afford and remain, I repeat again, an unhealthy president, because the country is unhealthy itself. But you need someone who's agile and able and capable.
I think a lot of people...
It's one of the traits that we need our leaders to have.
Yes.
It's not like I wanted to start running marathon myself, but a friend of mine encouraged me to start in 2013. And within a period of 10 years, I've done 10 marathons. This is going to be my 3rd marathon in Lagos. But let me also say that the president of a young nation like ourselves must encourage healthy living, must encourage sports. Do you know how much marathons bring into the Kenyan economy, the Ethiopian economy, Uganda, and all those countries that are doing, participating in marathons?
So even just
it's also a revenue earner.
The optics of having the presidential candidates taking part is psychologically a good boost.
Exactly.
Nevertheless, as we were saying, some would argue that the marathon is not the best judge. They would say that on the other side of the fence, many of the so-called political power brokers are reluctant to take a risk with a younger candidate like yourself, who they think is untested. In the cold light of day, some people would see that as the bottom line, wouldn't they?
Well, what is tested?
Well, you've never been in elected office.
No, I've never been in elected office, but I've been tested to be able to bring a process that elects people, democracy. You know, when we first met, you said, I met you so many years ago.
Yes, I remember that.
I was in my 20s when I was fighting for democracy. If we didn't have democracy, we would not be having elections now.
True.
You understand? So how do you need to be tested? It's character, it's competence, it's capacity, you know, it's alertness. Part of it is also mental fitness, because you can be 51 and not be mentally and physically fit.
That is true.
You know, you can be very young and useless. That's the truth. So to have been a governor is not a reason to elect somebody, especially when you've been governor and you governed terribly. You don't have anything to show for 8 years of being in office, no schools, no roads, no hospitals. So their kind of experience is not the experience we need. The experience we need is of a tested character. And that's what countries look for. The guy who's waging war in Ukraine was a comedian, right? The US president in the last few years before Biden were in their 40s. Obama, in our own area of expertise, activism, was a community organizer. So if there was a hierarchy, I'll probably be, you know, higher than him because I was a student union leader, I've been a media activist.
Yeah, but in fairness, I mean, Obama went through the process of Congress and all the rest of it.
So. Yeah, he was in the US Congress for a few months. What brought Obama to the national limelight was his speech at the Democratic Convention. Before then, he had even failed in a state senatorial election in the US. Did you know that? So after he gave that speech, he had massive exposure, and everybody started asking for him to go to the Senate. He won the senatorial election, and a few months, I would say, after that, they asked for him to be president, and he's regarded as one of the best presidents in the US. So if we had to go by their logic, Mandela ought not to have been a president of South Africa after spending 27 years in jail, because the only experience he had was how to keep calm in prison.
That's a reasonable argument.
Yes.
But
so, and no country should vote for somebody on the basis of failed experiments and experience. If people have claimed that they have experience, they have nothing to show for it, no records. Why do we keep looking for those? Where did the experience of these governors put you? Nowhere. None. There's no one of them that can show a school to you that they can send their children to. There's no one of the governors who are running now who can show a hospital in which they can treat themselves for headache anywhere in the country.
Right. So if
there's no one that can drive on our road without huge security and convoy and feel safe.
Yeah.
So why are we using the experience to judge where we should head next?
So let's then use you as a potential sort of hallmark bellwether. I mean, if you were to win the 2023 election, what would you do in your first 100 days?
I don't do 100 days. I would, hit the ground.
I like that. You do one day.
You hit the ground running from the moment you're sworn in. The idea of 100 days mark.
Yeah, but let's not waste time on arguing about 100 days. What would be what would be top of your in tray, and within what time frame would you hope to do that?
So first is to arrest the security conundrum in the country. Second is to start working on electricity, to build our electricity capacity, energy capacity as a whole spectrum to a reasonable level within 2 years. Reasonable level meaning that you'll be able to have 24 hours electricity supplied to nothing less than 2.
Yeah, but how would you do that?
Yes, energy mixes, in whichever part of the country. First, I will junk the national grid. Yes, that's a massive, plug to development of electrical
well,
power.
presumably you'd leave it on whilst you're installing.
Yes, so you have regional electricity, you have solar, you have tidal waves, controlled electricity, you use biogas, waste. All of these opportunities are virgin now.
And how are you going to fund those things?
Well, there is a lot of people who are even willing to fund some of them for free, because there's a climate change fund out there that will fund energy transition for you. But our leaders here, who we are dealing with, the so-called experience funds, don't even know the meaning of climate change. But there are funds out there that helps nations to transform and transition into new energy sources. And we need to do that as well. And the moment there's credible leadership in this country, money will be falling from everywhere. Investment will come your way. Ghana was talking about economic crisis a few weeks ago. By December, everybody who's black came from the US to come and celebrate their blackness in Ghana. They should have been in Nigeria. All those great artists that you saw. Our people had to go to Ghana for Christmas to go and see how small nations around us work. Here, we had no electricity. We had no fuel to celebrate Christmas and New Year. It's a disgrace. So there's no need to be apologetic about development in Nigeria. And there's no need relying on the same failed hands that put us in this way by arguing about the experience. There's no kind of experience like this that would have promoted any one of them from being a CFO to a CEO, because they have mismanaged the finances of this state. They are just there rewarding themselves while the rest of us languish in misery.
Right, and talking about fuel shortage.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you saw the report on Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who's a presidential candidate of the ruling APC party, saying that fuel scarcity and Naira redesign are plans to sabotage the elections. He was speaking, I think, in Ogun State, Abeokuta, and he was basically saying, he was urging people to ignore fuel if they have to trek, that there's some kind of revolution going on. I mean, some have suggested that that's a bit perverse coming from the presidential candidate of the ruling party.
That's what I'm going to say, is that he has sent a huge message, a very powerful message to the Nigerian people not to vote for him and his party. He's from the APC. They are the cause of fuel scarcity. He's just begging Nigerians not to vote for them, not to vote for him. But people don't listen to, he speaks in tongues sometimes, and this is what he's done again. The second aspect of it is revealing the fractures, or the fractious relationship within the top hierarchy of the ruling party. The word on the street is that Buhari is just pretending to support him for the presidency, that he's actually working for another candidate.
Well, obviously, we don't have any evidence to support that. I certainly don't.
Yes,
so I need to make that clear.
Yes, so that's the word on the street. We are the ones on the street because we're running, side by side against them. So, but the biggest message from me is, hey, this guy is begging not to be voted into office, and I hope Nigerians understand the nuances and the power of that message. That look, we brought you this misery, and if you want to continue the misery, vote for us. So otherwise, how could a driver of a vehicle be complaining that he didn't know that the tires were deflated before he started his journey? And if he did, the thing to do is not to say that somebody is sabotaging the tire at the back, is to fix the tire. But that means that things are falling apart in the APC. And we love it that way, because now Nigerians are coming to the realization of what we've always said.
Well, beyond the issue of fuel scarcity and the fact that he's talking about Naira redesign and all the rest of it, what are the other issues that concern you about this election? Because at that peace committee meeting recently, you raised some very important questions about peace and propriety in the 2023 election. What is your sense of the security of this election with just weeks to go?
So, we have to be clear that Nigeria has lost territory in every region to non-state actors, and that's a major concern. You go to the northeast, there is a whole lot of territory or inaccessible areas that have not been cleared of mines. When I say mines, political mines and all other kinds of mines that you cannot approach. You go to the northwest, banditry has made us lose territory. You go to the southeast, you can't even sing the Nigerian national anthem. But you don't want to solve the problem, because Nigeria brought itself to the southeastern conundrum by keeping Nnamdi Kanu as a political prisoner, thinking that would help quell the agitation for nationhood there. Now you've realized that you've made a huge mistake, and you are disobeying your court orders that says you let him go. And you are at the same time complaining that people there are not willing to vote. You go to the south, there's massive issue of oil theft. And that is not only bleeding the economy of the country, but it shows that there is no control over our security in the south. In fact, as at this point, Nigeria has ceded its waterways to a private contractor. Yes. So the Nigerian Navy has announced to the world that it can no longer protect the territorial integrity of sea and waterways.
But what impact do you think all that is going to have on the security of the election?
That's the problem. You know, it's not that you take a ballot box to people to vote alone that's a say, but who is going to vote if they are not sure that they can vote and get back home safe?
So is it
So it's also a function of perception.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So, but I think that the Nigerian ruling elite loves it when there is little territory to govern, because then they are not accountable to anybody and they don't have to be responsible for governing large swaths of area, because that's demanding. It tasks their mental capacity to do anything, and they don't have a lot of that.
But are you satisfied, though, that beyond the things that you and the other politicians can't control, are you satisfied that this peace meeting and the negotiations will stay the hands of those who may have been considering disrupting the peace, or is it likely not to make any difference?
It's a very symbolic thing. It doesn't have any force of control over them. The first peace accord we signed, the major candidates, one of them didn't show up. When this second one that we signed, it was here, one of the major candidates fell asleep throughout the peace meeting. And I had to challenge even the organizers of the peace accord.
Yes, I saw that clip.
Yes, they're saying, look, you can't be lying to us all the time. We had an election in 1993. It was peaceful, it was credible, transparent, fair. Everybody attested to that. You annulled it. And some 30 years later, you are drawing up a peace accord. You are yourself complicit in bringing a country to the condition it is. Some people also have no credibility to talk about peace in a country where they have violated the people when they were peaceful. The reason why people no longer trust elections is that when they did peaceful elections, you never allowed the results.
Well, you
to
turned
hold.
up at that peace committee.
I turned up so that I could tell them the truth.
Right.
And that's what I always do. And you know, the last signing of the accord we had, they brought the vice president of the candidate to the place and asked that he sits in my position. I fought him. That was the APC vice presidential candidate. So you can't sit in my place. And this time around also, when we started, I told them the arrangement was not satisfactory.
I saw that.
They already had all these big name political parties sitting in front. We're supposed to sit alphabetically. When we went into the meeting and they had driven out the press, they were calling the presidential candidates to speak alphabetically. Why didn't they let us sit alphabetically? It's because they have decided that some parties are big. It's a ruling elite thing, you know. And like I said, most of the time, this is their own way of throwing confusion, hubris, and making people feel like things are okay in Nigeria when they're not. So I go to this event so that I can be sure that my voice is heard and I can reflect, you know, the position of the Nigerian people on how they see these things. I'm a street candidate. I'm not a mainstream political candidate. I'm a main street political candidate. I talk to the street and I know how people feel. And I carry a lot of anger, righteous anger, against the way this country has been governed since I was born. And that's why when people ask me, where's your experience? You know, I just wonder what's wrong with us. The experienced people put you in misery. What you do is to change your mechanic.
Yeah, but those people on the streets that you say that you speak on their behalf, I mean, are they listening to you? Because in 2019, you ran for president. You got 34,000 votes.
I was going to address that. And 34,000 votes allocated to me.
Well, the point is that, I mean, you know, we're assuming that there was an election.
Yes, that's
and,
as you
and out
done,
of that
I
election,
have said openly that wasn't an election.
Well, the people you were running against got very big figures. I mean, you know, compared to you, President Buhari, 15 million, Atiku Abubakar, 11. I mean, are you aiming to better your 2019 performance in 2023? How do you assess your chances of victory in this election?
The chances of victory for me in 2023 is as good as the chances of victory for us in 1993 when I first entered the national space, political space, when an election was annulled. And it is that the people went out on that day. The military didn't even believe the elections would go out the way it went. That's why it became such a big problem for them. They voted for a candidate nobody expected to win. And that was Abiola at that time. Even though he was popular, people were still saying, you know, these Northerners will not allow this out. But when he won in Kano, everybody was shocked. It's the same thing that will happen today if there are free and fair elections. There is no way Nigerians will vote for people who brought them fuel scarcity, who killed their kids at NSAS, who have made life miserable, who claim that they are redesigning the Naira when actually they are just pouring dye on it. There's anybody will vote for a guy who made the Naira at 196 or a party and is now 740 Naira as of today. There's anybody will vote for someone who, when he came into office, they were buying chicken for a certain amount and now is about 500%. Whereas the country of Nigeria pushed 133 million people into multi-dimensional poverty. I heard about multidimensional poverty when I was in graduate school. I didn't know that it would be used as an adjective to describe Nigeria in 2023. So there is nobody who will vote for them against me. This is why we keep asking the media not to allow them escape scrutiny, bring them to debate. But the people you call front runners today, they have never sat on this seat to talk to you.
Well,
you
actually,
are one of the best.
Peter B sat there.
Well,
Kwankwaso sat there.
Yes, but the two other ones, two other ones you call front runners, you've never interviewed them.
Well, let me ask you this then, and we've just got.
We are one of the best journalists in this country.
Thank you, but I mean, we've just got about a couple of minutes, which is very sad because I could talk to you all evening, but. You feel that if the election was free and fair, that you would obviously do considerably better.
No, I will defeat the people you call front runners.
Well, in that regard, you might have heard the U.S. is imposing visa restrictions on certain unnamed individuals. It says try to undermine democracy in a recent election. It's also a warning that it's like a warning shot to say we're going to take much stiffer measures for the 2023 election. Are you encouraged by that move?
It's sound. I've always said the only thing I disagree with the U.S. on this kind of policy is that you don't impose visa restrictions on people and don't name them. Because that would discourage a lot of people who don't know who they are. I know who they are, and I will mention. I will mention them on your show. Sure. But I know who they are. They've been banning people since 2007 elections, and people who have tendency to be provocative and violent. But I mentioned it at the Peace Committee, and this is what the U.S. has done, that governors ought to be signing peace agreements, not some of them who were in the hall. And I can tell you categorically...
That's a good point.
Yes. I can tell you categorically that some of the people that are banned are governors.
Right.
And one from the north central part of the country.
Well, and on that revelatory note, I want to say thank you very much indeed. It's an absolute pleasure talking with you. You really are an interesting person, and I wish you the very best on the hustings and at the elections. And Omoyele Sowore is the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for bringing me your show.